10 singers who sold millions of records, filled arenas, had their voices on every radio station on the planet. And behind the scenes, behind the tour buses, behind the gold records, behind the magazine covers, they were going broke. Some of them lost it to drugs. Some of them lost it to managers they trusted like family. And some of them lost it to the one thing nobody in the music industry talks about, the contract that was rigged from the start. These aren't cautionary tales. These are real lives, real people. And the stories behind their fall hit harder than anything they ever sang. This is what the spotlight never showed you. Number 10, Meat Loaf. Here's a guy who had one of the biggest selling albums of all time, and 6 years later, he's filing for bankruptcy. That's not a slow decline, that's a trap door. Meat Loaf, born Marvin Leaday, released Bat Out of Hell in 1977. The album eventually moved over 40 million copies worldwide. It sat on the charts for more than 9 years. If you grew up anywhere near a radio or a record store, you know the songs. Paradise by the Dashboard Light, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. That album wasn't just a hit, it was an event. Baby, baby, let me sleep on it. But here's what nobody tells you about massive first albums. The machine doesn't wait for you to be ready. They wanted a follow-up, and Meat Loaf, physically, emotionally, creatively, wasn't ready. The pressure broke him. He had a full emotional breakdown, and then his voice went. Not metaphorically, his actual singing voice disappeared. The man who could shake the walls of an arena couldn't finish a sentence in the studio. And while he's trying to put himself back together, the lawsuits start. His former manager, his musical partner, Jim Steinman, 45 lawsuits, $80 million in claims, and the only way to stop the bleeding was to declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1983. He lost the rights to his own songs. His wife would try to cash a check at the grocery store, and they'd turn her away. The guy who had one of the 3 best-selling albums in history was scrounging to feed his family. And here's what gets me about this. He didn't disappear. He kept touring, smaller venues, Europe, Australia, acting gigs, whatever it took. And then in 1993, a full decade later, he and Steinman reunited for Bat Out of Hell 2. I'd Do Anything for Love went to number 1 in 28 countries. One of the greatest comebacks in the history of recorded music. But that decade in between, that was a man holding on by his fingernails and refusing to let go. Number 9, Dee Snider. Not afraid to be one. Picture this, 1984, Dee Snider is the front man of Twisted Sister. We're Not Gonna Take It is everywhere. The band has a quadruple platinum album. He's testifying in front of the United States Senate, going toe-to-toe with Tipper Gore, defending rock and roll on national television. That's as big as it gets. So what? So what? Now picture this, 1994, same guy, riding a bicycle to a desk job, answering phones for $200 a week. That's not a typo. After Twisted Sister broke up in 1988, Snider's solo project stalled. And instead of scaling back, he kept spending. Because the ego that gets you to the top is the same ego that tells you everything's going to be fine when it absolutely isn't. Lies that they try to control us, we're not. By 1995, Dee Snider was flat broke, double bankruptcy. He couldn't take his kids into a 7-Eleven because he couldn't afford to buy them a piece of candy. The guy who stood in front of Congress defending artistic freedom couldn't buy his children a Slurpee. You play us like we're fools. And stay with me on this. Here's the part that's almost too honest. He had nobody to blame. No crooked manager, no stolen royalties. He said it himself. I looked at every other rock star who crashed and said, that'll never be me. I don't drink. I don't get high. I don't have a manager ripping me off. And I didn't. I did it to myself. If you've ever watched someone you admire admit that the worst thing that happened to them was their own fault, you know that takes a different kind of courage, the kind that doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, but the ending matters. Middle fingers in the air, singing we don't... His wife Suzette, who'd been with him since before the band even existed, never left. And in 1998, a Christmas song he'd written for her years earlier landed on a Celine Dion holiday album. That royalty check started a comeback he's still writing today. The song that saved him wasn't a metal anthem. It was a love letter.
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
Number 8, Cyndi Lauper. Before the pink hair, before girls just want to have fun, before Cyndi Lauper became one of the defining voices of the 1980s. She was bankrupt. This part always surprises people. In the early 80s, Lauper was the lead singer of a band called Blue Angel. They released one album. It flopped. And then their manager, Steve Masarski, sued the band for $80,000 and tried to keep control of their music. Lauper was broke. No hits, no leverage, no way to fight it. She filed for bankruptcy. And for a while after that, she was working in retail and singing in small clubs just to keep the lights on. You know that feeling when you've given everything to something and it falls apart and you're standing in the wreckage trying to figure out if you start over or walk away. That's where Cyndi Lauper was. Now, here's the thing about this story. Most people who file for bankruptcy in the music business never get a second shot. The industry doesn't hand out do-overs. But Lauper went back into the studio, this time solo, and recorded She's So Unusual in 1983. 4 top 5 singles off one album. She won the Grammy for Best New Artist. She was 30 years old and the industry was calling her new. She'd been grinding for a decade. And if you think about the spirit of girls just want to have fun, that reckless, joyful, defiant energy, it hits different when you know what she'd been through. That wasn't a party song from someone who'd had it easy. That was someone who'd climbed out of a hole and decided she was going to have a good time, whether the world liked it or not. If you've ever bounced back from something that should have ended you, you know exactly what that song really means. Number 7, Billy Joel.
He says, son, can you play me a memory?
Here's one that makes your stomach turn. Billy Joel, Piano Man, Uptown Girl, one of the best-selling solo artists of all time, trusted his brother-in-law with every dollar he'd ever earned, and his brother-in-law spent it. Frank Weber took over as Joel's manager after Joel divorced Weber's sister, Elizabeth, and for years Joel didn't ask questions. He wanted to be an artist, not a businessman. He said it himself, He stayed away from the money on purpose because he didn't want anyone to think he was just grinding out hits for cash. He thought ignoring the business side proved his integrity, and that's the part that hurts. He wasn't naive because he was stupid. He was naive because he cared about the wrong thing at the wrong time. It was Christy Brinkley, Joel's wife at the time, who noticed something was off. People kept telling Joel he owned horses, property, things he'd never heard of. She told him flat out, "Frank Weber's ripping you off." And Joel didn't want to hear it. He trusted Weber more than he trusted her. And she said later, "That hurt me to hear."
Politics as a businessman slowly gets stoned.
When Joel finally authorized an audit, the truth came out. Weber had allegedly poured over $10 million into his own companies, gave out $2.5 million in unauthorized loans, mortgaged Joel's copyrights for $15 million without telling him, and Joel owed the IRS $5 million he didn't have.
But it's better than drinking alone.
In 1989, he filed a $90 million lawsuit. Weber declared bankruptcy. Joel reportedly walked away with about $8 million, a fraction of what was gone.
Feeling alright.
And this is what people forget, he had to go right back to work. New songs, new tours. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. The hit machine had to restart just to pay the bills. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you let all the way in, you know the money isn't even the worst part. It's the trust you can't get back. Number 6, Scott Stapp. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Creed was one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. Here, with arms wide open. Human Clay sold over 11 million copies. Scott Stapp was the voice, the face, the front man, and then somehow all of it vanished. By November 2014, Stapp posted a 16-minute video to Facebook, black and white, shot on a borrowed phone, and in it he told the world he was penniless, living in a Holiday Inn, that before the hotel, he'd been sleeping in his truck, that he'd gone 2 days without eating and ended up in the emergency room. The frontman of a band that sold over 28 million albums couldn't buy a meal. He claimed the IRS had frozen his accounts, that money had been stolen, that royalties hadn't been paid. His wife had filed for divorce, and the details were messy. Allegations of drug use, conspiracy claims, a life unraveling in real time with the whole internet watching. Some people believed him, some didn't. But here's the thing nobody could argue with, and whether the cause was theft, addiction, mismanagement, or some brutal combination of all three, this was a man who'd had everything and was now sitting in a hotel room telling the world he had nothing. And if you were around during the Creed era, you probably had an opinion about that band. Everybody did. They were loved hard or hated hard. There wasn't much in between. But strip away the memes in the backlash, and what you've got is a human being who made music that meant something to millions of people and then lost the ability to hold his own life together. That's not a punchline. That's a warning. Number 5, Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen spent 15 years living in a Zen Buddhist monastery on Mount Baldy in California. He wasn't hiding, he was searching. And while he was meditating, writing, trying to find some kind of peace, his manager was draining his bank accounts.
What is right?
Her name was Kelly Lynch. She'd been Cohen's personal manager for nearly 17 years. They were close, genuinely close. He named her in his living will. Their families spent holidays together. He trusted her with everything, his finances, his publishing, his retirement. And in 2005, when Cohen was 71 years old, he came down from the mountain and found out she'd allegedly embezzled more than $5 million. His retirement savings were gone. His publishing rights had been sold off without his knowledge. The person he trusted more than almost anyone had gutted him while he wasn't looking.
Can't seem to loosen my grip.
And here's where this story turns into something else. Most 71-year-old artists who've been wiped out financially would walk away. Cohen didn't. He did the one thing he'd spent his whole career avoiding. He went on tour, and not a small tour. He rehearsed for 3 months, assembled a 9-piece band, played 3-hour shows.
You were moving so fast.
And over the next 5 years, between 2008 and 2013, Leonard Cohen performed 387 concerts for more than 2 million people. He grossed nearly $150 million at 71. Because a woman he loved like family had stolen his future, and he had to earn it back one stage at a time.
I'm what I'm told.
A court ordered Lynch to pay him $9.5 million. She never paid. She was eventually jailed for harassment. And Cohen, who'd spent decades being one of the most private, contemplative artists alive, spent his final years under the spotlight he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Not because he wanted to, because someone left him no choice. He died in November 2016. And if that isn't a story about dignity in the face of betrayal, I don't know what is. Number 4, Jerry Lee Lewis.
All over town.
Jerry Lee Lewis didn't just help invent rock and roll. He kicked the door open with both boots. Great balls of fire. Whole lot of shaking going on. By the late 1950s, he was one of the biggest names in music. Not one of the biggest. Sharing that stage with Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, he was untouchable.
Out here running round.
And then he destroyed it himself. In 1958, while touring the UK, the press discovered that Lewis had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. She was also his third wife. The backlash was immediate and devastating. Radio stations pulled his records. Venues canceled shows. His booking fee dropped from $10,000 a night to $250 overnight. One of the most electric performers alive couldn't get a gig.
You win again.
Now, some people hear that and think, well, he deserved it. And you can make that argument, but what happened after is where the story gets complicated. Lewis didn't quit. He pivoted to country music and had real success. Hits like To Make Love Sweeter For You and Me and Bobby McGee charted well. He rebuilt from almost nothing, but the money never stuck. The IRS came after him hard. They seized his property, slapped him with a nearly $2 million tax bill. In 1988, he was forced to declare bankruptcy.
But then,
And here's what's wild about Jerry Lee Lewis. He kept going, kept performing, kept living louder than anybody around him. He outlasted nearly every one of his contemporaries. But the financial ruin, the years of owing more than he could ever earn back, followed him for the rest of his life.
hey girl, I trusted in you.
He died in October 2022 at 87 years old. And the question his story leaves you with isn't easy to answer. Can talent survive the worst version of itself? Because Jerry Lee Lewis proved that it can. But the cost was everything else. Number 3, David Cassidy.
From something that keeps knocking at my brain before I go in.
If you were alive in the early 70s, you know what David Cassidy meant. The Partridge Family made him the biggest teen idol on the planet. His face was on every lunchbox, every magazine, every bedroom wall in America. He sold more than 30 million records. His fan club was bigger than the Beatles and Elvis's.
Case, let me ask you to your face, do you think you love me?
He was 20 years old and more famous than anyone his age had ever been. And by 2015, he filed for bankruptcy with $10 million in debt. Here's the thing about David Cassidy that makes this story ache. The fame he had as a kid was a trap. He was the product, not the artist. The decisions about his career were made for him. The money was managed for him.
Still, I'd better stay around and love you. Do you think I haven't?
And by the time he was old enough to take the wheel, the machine had already moved on. The fame dried up, the royalties shrank. Cassidy spent the next 4 decades trying to be taken seriously as an artist in a world that only wanted him to be Keith Partridge. The substance abuse came later. DUI arrests, public incidents, the kind of spiral that the tabloids feast on. And behind all of it, the money was evaporating. Creditors included Wells Fargo, American Express, Citibank, the kind of names that don't chase you unless the hole is deep. And here's the part that still gets me. He died in November 2017 at 67 years old. His last words, according to his daughter, were, "So much wasted time." Not wasted talent, not wasted money, wasted time. If you've ever looked back at something that should have been beautiful and realized it got stolen from you before you were old enough to protect it, that one lands. Because David Cassidy didn't go broke the way most people do. He was set up to go broke from the day the camera started rolling. Number 2, Courtney Love. Courtney Love is a rock star in her own right, front woman of Hole, celebrity skin, violet, doll parts. She built a career that stood on its own before, during, and after her marriage to Kurt Cobain. But when Cobain died in 1994, Love became the custodian of something worth far more than her own catalog, his publishing rights. And what happened to that money is one of the ugliest stories in modern rock. In an interview with The Fix, Love said that after Cobain's death, she was too deep in grief and addiction to pay attention to what was happening with the money. She did drugs from the moment she woke up until the moment she went to sleep, and when it came to business decisions, she just did what she was told. By the time she realized what had happened, the fortune, tens of millions, was effectively gone. She and her daughter, Frances Bean, had to move in with Love's stepfather. She said they didn't have enough money to eat. The widow of one of the most important rock musicians of the 20th century was depending on family just to survive. And then in 2013, she again said publicly she was near bankruptcy. That money had been taken from her accounts by people she described in less than flattering terms. Though, as more than one outlet pointed out, the accuracy of her financial claims has always been contested. But here's where I think this story matters more than the numbers. Courtney Love didn't lose her money the way most people lose money. She lost it in the fog of grief, in the chaos of a loss so public and so devastating that the entire world watched it happen. And instead of getting space to grieve and figure out what was left, she became the most scrutinized widow in rock history. Everyone had an opinion about how she should handle Cobain's legacy. And while they were debating, the money was moving. Without her. If you've ever made terrible decisions during the worst chapter of your life and then had to live with those decisions in public, you know even a fraction of what that feels like. Number 1, Sly Stone. And this is where the list ends. Not with a comeback, not with a silver lining, with a man living in a van. Sly Stone, born Sylvester Stewart, was the architect. He didn't just play funk, he built the blueprint. Sly and the family Stone fused soul, rock, psychedelia, and gospel into something that didn't exist before them. Everyday people. Thank you, Falatin me, be mice elf Agen. Family Affair. 3 #1 singles. They headlined Woodstock in 1969 in front of hundreds of thousands of people. The band was racially integrated, mixed gender, and sonically ahead of everything around them. James Brown may have invented funk, but Sly Stone perfected it. In the 70s, Stone lived in a 5,000 square foot mansion in Beverly Hills. He hosted parties for Stevie Wonder, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Miles Davis. He collected cars, a purple Jaguar, Hummers, a gold Studebaker. And then the drugs took hold. Cocaine, erratic behavior. The band fell apart, the record stopped selling, and the vultures moved in. In 1984, he sold his music publishing rights to Michael Jackson for a reported $1 million. $1 million for a catalog that shaped the entire direction of popular music. And then there was his manager, Jerry Goldstein. Stone signed a contract with Goldstein in 1989, and according to Stone's lawsuit, Goldstein collected the royalties, controlled the money, and left Stone with nothing. Stone testified that he didn't receive a single royalty payment between 1989 and 2009. 20 years, 2 decades of silence, while someone else cashed the checks on music that changed the world. By 2011, Sly Stone, the man who headlined Woodstock, was homeless, living in a white camper van parked on a residential street in the Crenshaw neighborhood of Los Angeles. A retired couple let him shower at their house and made sure he ate once a day. That's what it came down to. The architect of an entire genre, surviving on the kindness of strangers, he sued Goldstein for $50 million. In 2015, a jury awarded him $5 million. But the ruling was overturned on a technicality. The court said Stone had legally signed away his royalty rights in 1989. The money never came. The case was eventually settled out of court. Stone regained some rights to his name. But the fortune, the legacy, the life he was supposed to live, gone. Sly Stone died on June 9th, 2025. He was 82 years old. And if you want to understand what went broke behind the scenes really means, it means this. A man who gave the world its rhythm, who stood on the biggest stages ever built, who changed the DNA of popular music, and the industry took everything from him and kept playing his records like nothing happened.